Hi there. This is Frater IAC, and I'm back with another video. This time we're going to wind up step one, the physical exercises section. And in that, Bardon talks about lifestyle. He talks about the magic of washing, the magic of eating and drinking, and the magic of breathing. So that's what we're going to do here. But first, I think we need just a little bit of context. Ah, Oh my goodness. Look at this fellow, this rabbit. That's a rabbit. I love that. Wow, what a great special effect. Um, this is from the Twilight Zone movie where it was the Anthony episode. And this little kid, Anthony, had serious telekinetic powers, and he was terrorizing these people that he had trapped living in the house with him. And they had to cook him meals and entertain him and all kinds of stuff. And he told this guy to pull a rabbit out of the hat. And the guy was scared to death because he knew that something like this had come out when he pulled the rabbit out of the hat. He got a big mutated thing coming out of there. So, fun picture, but true. Because when we talk about the astral plane or the astral realm, it really is the new spiritual frontier. In later steps of initiation into Hermetics, you're going to learn how to travel astrally, how to have an out of body experience, among many other things. And the astral plane is fascinating. Um, so I thought it'd be kind of nice to look at this to give context to this, because when you are dealing with these larvae, these negative things on your soul mirror, those are larvae. Those are schemata. And so the reality is, um, you know, you have to really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And when I've said before that when you're clearing out your black soul mirror, you make the soul mirror, you're brutally honest with yourself, you list every single thing that doesn't serve you that you want to change about yourself, and then you're using some of the most powerful transformative techniques ever to achieve that. This is work in the astral realm that you're doing, soul work. So, and these negative traits on your black mirror are in fact larvae. So, anyway, look at what Bardon says about them. On the astral plane, often depicted as the fourth dimension, is also created out of the four elements and therefore is a density degree of the akasha. Okay, so the astral realm is a subset of the akasha. Okay. Consequently, Bardon goes on, the astral plane forms the basis of everything which has an origin, regulation, and life existence. Everything that has been, is now, or ever will be is in the astral realm, including this rabbit. Um, that is why, Bardon goes on, you will see in the astral plane the emanation of the eternal, which has neither a beginning nor an end, and is therefore timeless and spaceless. So he says the initiate who finds his way about this plane will find everything here, whether it be the past, the present, or the future. The extent of perception depends on one's degree of perfection or spiritual maturity. So let's move on and talk about larvae and schemata, because I alluded to both on the last slide. So this text, the first two paragraphs, come from the theory section of Initiation into Hermetics. In the theory section, there's a subhead titled "The Astral Plane." That's where this is. And then this last paragraph comes from a later step, I think maybe step 7. Anyway, let's kind of take a look at what Bardon says about this. There's also another kind of being, the so-called larvae, which are called into existence through the astral matrix, intentionally or unintentionally, by intensive emotional thinking. What is the astral matrix? Well, if you hold up your hand against a white background or even a dark background and see if you can make out energy, an energy outline around your fingers. That's called an aura. And it's also your physical body has a boundary with the astral body, which is your emotional makeup, your personality. And then the astral personality has a boundary with the mental body. And the boundary between the physical and astral body is called the astral matrix. So whenever you experience a strong emotion, whether positive or negative, a larva is born out of your astral matrix. And it is an energy form that takes form in the astral realm. And if you repeat the same excitement, the same psychic excitement repeats itself often and regularly, it forms a condensed force around you that Bardon calls a larva. And Bardon's not the only one that uses the word larva. Muni Sadhu uses the term larva in his book, The Tarot. So good for you to know. Um, anyway, a larva is just basically like people come. A lot of people have come back from Iraq, or they maybe had some abuse that happened at the hands of somebody. Maybe they got bullied, whatever it was. If that happened repeatedly, that's going to build up a really strong larva of fear, of anger, of shame, of pride, right? And so you have to really understand these things are clustered around you and they feed off you. They feed off your strong emotions. And so if you keep feeling that same emotion that created that larva, it's it's happy because it's going to be able to feed. And what a lot of larvae do when they get really powerful is they put you in situations where you have to feed them, with that same emotion. So watch out for the larva. You got to get rid of them. And then the last paragraph here, Bardon talks about schemata. Now, the difference, he says, between a larva and a schema is that the larva, as a result of a single or repeated psychic excitement, unconsciously assumes a form in the mental sphere that coincides with the original motive or feeling. Whereas a schema obtains a particular form which arises from the fantasy of a human being. Now, it took me a long time to figure out what he actually meant here, because what he calls schema, we know as archetypes. And in a prior video that I put on my YouTube channel, I had a viewer who said, okay, you're talking about this initiate steps 1 and 2 and initiation into Hermetics as a whole as being the path between Malkuth, which is this earth, and Yesod, which is ruled by the planetary power of the moon, because you have to be at Yesod to start doing magic. You just do. And so he said, well, what about the other two, Had and Netzach? Well, Netzach is the realm of schemata or archetypes, because that's what they're also called, archetypes. So when we look at the various types of schemata, they're pictures you have about how you are. And I'll explain that in a subsequent slide. So hold that thought because we are going to talk about schema and schemata. Okay, and look, look at this. Um, Gosh, what a happy crew this is. These are the larvae that are gathered around you as we speak. And if you're in step one, you got to get rid of these guys because they're holding you back from a world that is so rich and so magnificent that words can't even describe it. But you got to get rid of these things first. And as I said earlier, this is going to take a sustained effort over a period of time to get this done. But you got to do it. So now let's kind of go over some of these. I use the rubric of the Christian seven deadly sins because that was by request. Somebody said, "Well, you said this is how you did it, and it is in fact how I did it." So we can start with pride. You know, there's two kinds of pride. There's feelings of just superiority. I'm better than all of you and that's just the way it is. Well, no, because here's the reality. No matter how gifted somebody is, okay, their gifts that they were given, their talents are on loan from the divine mind. Because each of us is born at a place, in a time, among people, and presented with situations where we can use the talents we have in this incarnation on loan to advance spiritually as far as we can in this life or not. It's our choice. But you got to realize, no matter how smart you are, no matter how athletic you are, you could just as easily have been born completely different and you would still be every bit as precious in the eyes of divine providence as anyone else as you are now. So that's part of pride. The other part of pride is called vainglory. And the thing about vainglory, that is the feverish desire to please other people. People that have this problem are called pleasers or people pleasers. And so they're so worried about pleasing the people around them, they don't worry about what fulfills their needs and they're certainly not worried about pleasing divine providence, which is that's the only entity you really have to please because you're engaged in a spiritual ascent. You are a spirit that's having a physical experience. You are not your body. You are a spirit that is having a physical experience. And so don't take pride in your physical gifts. Use them for the good to serve the light. So anyway, pride. Anger. I've got a salamander here. Oh, look at him. Gosh, isn't he angry? And the thing about anger, the thing about any of these, okay, why it's valuable to group these things under a rubric like this is you might have 10 or 15 things where you have exhibited anger in different ways. You are holding a grudge against your fourth grade teacher. You gotta let that go. You're subject to road rage. There's somebody at your office that you just hate so much that it makes you angry every time you see them, every time you even think about them. There's the collector that called that was a jerk toward you. There was the telemarketer, whatever it is that upsets you, that's all grouped under this one thing. And so if you're working on this one thing, you're going to take care of 6 or 8 of these black mirror characteristics at one time by working on the root of them. So you don't work on them line by line. You group them under whatever category you're using, in this case, anger, and then you work on anger. That's how to dramatically reduce the time it's going to take. You're still going to take time. It's still a sustained effort over an extended time, but it's not as extended as it would be if you did it line by line. Now look at gluttony. What a fine example he is, huh? He's got this big gaping maw where his gut should be, and he's never, ever going to be able to eat enough. Gluttony. These are people who eat long past when their body tells them, hey, stop eating, I'm full, you know? And their gluttony can take many forms. You know, you can be a glutton toward all kinds of different stuff, not just food. I mean, if you're a glutton toward alcohol, you can become an alcoholic, which leads you into sloth. So let's talk about sloth. Look at this guy. That's pretty scary. That's a parasitical insect that is probably really tiny. And when you look at it, you think, "Oh man, does my scalp itch?" Because you're looking at this thing as a flea. And so sloth takes two forms. Sloth can be a spiritual laziness. And the way that looks is like, let's say that you're young, because I was once young, and I had this calling from childhood, but I didn't even answer it until I was in my 50s or I was 50, I think, or late 40s or early 50s, I don't know. But I finally answered the call. Um, and the reason I didn't take up that gauntlet when I was a child is because I was afraid I'd miss something. I was afraid I'd miss parties. I was afraid I'd miss getting drunk. I was afraid I'd miss driving fast in a muscle car. I was afraid I'd miss great sex, a great job, a fat bank account, whatever. But guess what? This world is a material place. It's finite. You live, you you're born, you live, and then you die. You don't take anything from this world with you. So most people that are subject to spiritual laziness don't commit themselves to the spiritual path and embrace that realization that they are actually a spirit having a physical experience. They retreat into the physical experience and don't think about the spiritual ascent because they're busy. They're busy amassing wealth. They're busy amassing power. They're busy having sex. They're busy doing whatever. Okay? That's one form of sloth. The other form of sloth is avoidance. The everybody has existential angst. If you sit quietly, um, gosh, our culture here in the West, our cultures are so materialistic. We're in the United States, we are a consumer culture. So we're expected to buy stuff, and we're often expected to buy stuff that we don't really need with money that we don't really have, and we run up debt. And we don't really think about spirituality. We think about material things because spirituality scares us because at its end, we're talking about the death of our physical vessel, our physical body, because our physical body is going to die and it is going to go back to the dust. But our consciousness moves on into the next realm. And people don't really want to come to terms with that. And so they delve into addictions. They might get addicted to cigarettes, to drugs, to alcohol. They might get addicted to sex or shopping and running up credit card debt. They might get addicted to gambling. There's all kinds of stuff, gaming. There's all kinds of stuff you can become addicted to, you know? And that all that does is put something else in the way of your ascent toward oneness with the divine mind. That's all it does. And so you don't want to get addicted to anything. And if you are, you want to get rid of the addiction. That is sloth. Uh, in Since I'm Christian, I'll tell you in a biblical sense, sloth is the found in Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, and it's the night bird that cries in desolate places. Because I'll tell you what, you get addicted to drugs, you're going to be in a pretty desolate place, and it's going to take you a long time to find your way back. So don't get addicted, and if you are, get rid of the addiction as fast as you can. So now, uh, fear, I have him down here on the lower left hand of the slide. That's probably the root cause of most of these deadly sins is fear. People are scared of dying, they're scared of suffering, they're scared of deprivation, they're scared of missing a meal, blah blah blah. And I have him over here, so he does look scary, doesn't he? That's fear. And fear drives the show. I mean, when we look at the wealth imbalance, where we have the top like one half of 1%, is more wealthy than like 6 billion people on this planet, that's because the people that are super wealthy are so scared that they're not going to have enough that they just feverishly amass this wealth at our expense, at the expense of the rest of the people on the earth. So, that's kind of what fear does. It causes you to do wrong to your brother or sister because you're scared. Got it? Lust, what a fine looking specimen this fellow is. The thing I'll say about is lust is the dehumanization. Okay. Like I'm a man. I like the aesthetic of the female body as much as the next guy. But if I'm looking at a female body and I'm looking at it as a body that I want to have sex with, okay, instead of looking at that as a person, as a human being that has her own feelings and her own aspirations and her own problems and her own virtues, then I have dehumanized her or him, depending on what gender you prefer or are, you know, you're objectifying that other person and they cease to be human in your eyes and start just becoming an object for you. And of course, the virtue that is opposite of lust, of course, is is respect, compassion, empathy, the realization that here's this other person whose soul is every bit as precious in the eyes of divine providence as yours is. You better treat him that way, right? And so, don't be like this lust guy. And then greed. I love this picture. It is straight out of a Monopoly game. This guy'd fit right in on the Wall Street, wouldn't he, or on the Bourse? But greed, and I don't need to belabor that because the picture is worth 1,000 words. Envy is wanting something that your neighbor has and being willing to hurt them to get it, right? And so we see who was it? Who was it that King David sent into battle so he could marry the guy's wife Bathsheba? I forget the name of the guy, but David sent him into battle and he got killed. And so he ended up marrying his widow, Bathsheba, because he lusted after Bathsheba. So there's lust, right? And he envied this guy. And so he sent the guy into a certain death in battle so he could get his wife. That's envy. That's what that looks like. It's terrible. Don't do it. Anyway, enough of that. Oh my goodness. Here are your astral schemata, otherwise known as archetypes. Now, I've got three on the top. There are literally dozens of these things, okay? So don't think there's only six. I just put the ones that I wanted to talk about as an example here. Like if we look at this fellow with the wheelbarrow, we saw him on a prior presentation. This is the worrywart. See, he's so worried about the future, these phantoms. He's worried about it and worried about it and worried about it. And, he's so worried about the future that he doesn't live in the present. Don't be that way. That is a schemata. That is the worry wart. Okay. Look at the guy next to him, the user, the reptile. Oh, man. Talk about it. I love these pictures. But this is an emotional vampire. Okay. That's what a user is. Yeah. And you've all known users. Think about people you have known who have used you and then trotted off and lived their own lives and left you holding the bag. Okay. That's a user. Okay. An emotional vampire. That's somebody that feeds off of your feelings, you know? And so they like I knew this lady at the office years ago, and she used to, there was this guy that worked with us, and she would come in and she knew just how to push his buttons. And one day she came in and she was talking to this guy. His name was Jay, and she was talking to Jay, and she said, "Well, this and this and this and this." And I watched him, and he pulls a bottle of prescription pills out of his pocket, and he's popping these pills while this lady is talking to him. Don't do that. You've got to get rid of these. You have to create an imperviousness, boundaries, healthy boundaries, so you don't get used, and you don't want to be one of these users either. And then, of course, on the right, we have the pompous bore. This is the person who comes to Thanksgiving dinner and talks about politics to the extent that they cast a pall over the entire dinner. Don't be that person. You got to get rid of that. Don't be a bore. All right. And then at the bottom, this row on the bottom of the slide, I don't know where I read it. I don't know who said it. Um, but I read it someplace on Facebook, and it was an essay. It was really good. And the person said there's basically three types of people, right? There's victims, there's rescuers, and there's masters. So the victim is the person who is never responsible for anything bad that ever happens to them. It's always somebody else's fault. And then on the other side of that, we have the rescuer. And this person is intent on rescuing people from whatever it is that they've brought upon themselves. And so, guess what? The law of attraction, the rescuer is going to attract these victims, and the victims are going to attract the rescuer, and they're going to be codependent. They're going to feed off each other in a very dysfunctional relationship that doesn't do either of them a darn bit of good. Don't be a victim. Don't be a rescuer. Get rid of those archetypes within yourself and become a master. And look at this. I like this picture. I liked it so much that I put a nice orange glow around it. This is a person who has boundaries, healthy boundaries. It is a person who has compassion, who has empathy, who is filled with virtues, but who understands that many people, everyone has to follow their own path. And so sometimes you're not going to be able to, you might extend a helping hand to a victim, but you're not going to let them climb on your back. Okay. And you're not going to become a rescuer. And you're certainly not going to allow yourself to become a victim. No matter what happens to you in your life, you're going to realize I'm a spirit having a physical experience. My life is finite, and I am experiencing good times and bad times in order to grow spiritually. That is the seed of mastery, right? So now we've talked about larvae, and we've talked about archetypes or schemata. So now we're ready to move on. Now, I said in an earlier video that our cultures here in the West, in the United States, definitely Western Europe to a degree, certainly most of the advanced industrialized nations are profoundly materialistic. In the United States, we're a consumer culture. 70% of our entire economy is based on consumerism, consumption, you know. So we're expected to go out and buy stuff, and often run up debt buying stuff we don't need with money we don't have because it's a patriotic thing to do because it makes the economy chug along strongly. Well, the problem with that is when I was doing vocational counseling, even way back when, when the baby boomers were young, they would come in and they'd say, I worked at this job for like 20 years. I got laid off and I want to do something for me now because I hated that job. Yeah, it didn't give me any sense of meaning at all. And I want to do something in my life that is meaningful. Do you want meaning in your own life? Because if you do, you need to embrace the spiritual path because that is the seed of meaning. And let me explain. How much money are you going to be able to take with you when you die? Oh, none? Okay. Are you going to be able to take your big house or your nice car with you when you die? Nope. Are you going to be able to take all the people that you hang around with or your friends with you when you die? No, you're not. We're here today and gone tomorrow. Think about the Sermon on the Mount, where Christ talks about how the lilies of the field, they neither toil nor spin, yet Solomon in all his glory was not clothed as one of these. And he goes on to say, don't worry about that then. If God clothes the flowers as well as he does, why should you even worry about it? Divine mind, the source, knows you have these basic survival needs. But seek first the kingdom, i.e., your spiritual ascent, and then all these other things will be added to you. And actually, I wish I'd have known that when I was much younger, because I would have started on this path at a much younger age. I really would have. You know, I wasted a lot of years on materialism, and it didn't do me a darn bit of good. But I'll tell you what, this path has. So I've got the moral compass here under Hermeticism. According to David Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force, and we talked about his model in an earlier presentation, so I won't belabor it. But these 4 points of the moral compass are love, joy, peace, and enlightenment, right? And they correspond with the four elements. And I have this highlighted in, I don't know, I can't tell whether it's gold or orange. I was trying for gold, so we'll just call it gold. But anyway, that's the moral compass versus this money and things, which, you need them while you're alive. I mean, let's not be stupid. I mean, I like nice things as much as the next guy. And yes, I do own a car, I have a job, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, though, that's not me. That is what my physical vessel needs to do to meet its survival needs. But my efforts are spent on the spiritual ascent. So that hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay, so now I want to talk about three of what I call the big five. And these five are among the most powerful magical techniques of spiritual alchemy that you will ever come across. And you will be using all of these not only in step 1 and 2, but you're going to use these skills throughout initiation into Hermetics and beyond. Let me repeat that. You will use these techniques of active introspection not only in steps 1 and 2, but throughout initiation into Hermetics and beyond. They are that important and that powerful. So now let's look at these three. All right. So Bardon talks about the magic of washing and the magic of eating and drinking and the magic of breathing. And I think that's a pretty snazzy picture of a pair of lungs, isn't it? Oh, I loved it. I got that from Pixabay. I love the colors. But and then of course I've got the chopsticks holding up those pot stickers. And I'm particularly partial to pan-seared pot stickers. But anyway, enough of that. These are three of the big five: washing, eating and drinking, and breathing. So now, what do you need? Well, this slide says pick a card, any card. And I have two cards. I've got temperance and I've got the devil. Because you got to pick a vice and a virtue to go with it to apply these transformative techniques properly. Got to have a virtue and a matching vice. So let's talk about the magic of washing. And I have this slide titled Rub-a-Dub. After that song, that came out in the 50s, Rub-a-Dub. I was sitting in the tub long about a Saturday night. Most Americans actually, I suspect, take showers. I certainly take showers. So when you're in the shower, what Bardon tells you is turn the water down to where it's cold and shower in cold water, because then the magnetic properties of the water, because water is the magnetic force, will draw out the vice that you're trying to draw out, and it'll go down the drain right along with the dirt. Okay, that's fine. But I don't care for cold showers. So, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't do that. And it worked fine for me anyway. Just saying. Um, so when I take a shower, and when you're in step 1, what Bardon tells you, take a shower, and what you're going to do is soap yourself off and you're going to wash, but you're going to imagine, you're going to use your will and your imagination to imagine that the vice that you're trying to get rid of is rinsed off your body right along with the dirt, and it goes down the drain. That's all it is. But there is a refinement that you can do, courtesy of Josephine McCarthy in Quaria, because that's who I learned it from. Uh, she has a whole section in her apprenticeship section about a ritual bath. And the ritual bath, and she is a big proponent of salt water to use to wash away negative spiritual energies. And salt is, in fact, a very cleansing mineral. Okay, so salt works, and you can use. What I do is I'll take a glass pitcher of lukewarm water, and I'll stir in a bunch of salt in it, and I'll take that right into the shower with me. I do that particularly when I'm going to do a ritual. Okay, but you can use it if you've got a particularly stubborn vice that you're trying to get rid of. Do this, okay? Take a pitcher of cool water, stir in a bunch of salt, take it in the shower with you, do your business, wash, and then you pick it up, and you say, and I usually preface it, being Christian, with in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I now cleanse myself of whatever the vice is, and then I pour the water over my head, and it's cold. You definitely get a frisson from it, but it's cold. And you pour it over your head and then rinse yourself off because salt water causes your body to get sticky and itchy. So, make sure you rinse. But that works really well because the salt aids in washing away that vice. Interesting how that works. Okay, so now let's look at the next one. Oh my goodness, it's a Thanksgiving dinner. This is the Thanksgiving dinner that you don't want to be a bore. And talk about your political leanings, just go and have fun and have fellowship with your family. But you're also going to practice the magic of eating and drinking. So here's how to do it. Um, what I do is I will take the plate or the cup of water, because I pretty much only drink water. I'm a teetotal, but anyway, I'll take the cup of water and I'll put my hands on it and I'll say, I charge this cup of water with the virtue of whatever it is, kindness, uh, generosity, humility, whatever. Okay, whatever I'm working on, I charge it with that virtue. When I eat or drink of it, when I drink of it, because it's a cup, uh, the drink, the water, will nourish my body, and at the same time, the virtue of fill in the blank will nourish my soul and mind. And if you read the section in Initiation into Hermetics, that's how Bardon describes it. He says that you are charging the food or the water with that virtue. That virtue actually exists in that water, in that food, as an energy form. It's a thought feeling form that has now joined with that food and that drink. So when you drink it, yeah, sure, the water is going to assuage your thirst, but the virtue, the energy of that virtue is going to go through the physical matrix and nourish the astral and mental bodies. That's how the magic of eating and drinking works. Very, very effective. And the Christians call it the Eucharist. Um, and you are going to be using this. This works for you as a transformative, transmutative step all the way through initiation into Hermetics because and beyond. You're going to be working with the Eucharist, especially with the letter C in the key to the true Kabbalah, because the letter C is the letter of the Eucharist. And Bardon gives you, in that tome, he gives you a little more about what the Eucharist actually does at the spirit, mental, and astral levels. Very interesting. So now, last one, I have the slide titled "The Breath of Life," um, but basically, for there's a lot more to breathing, and I use a hesychastic, what I call a vertical cross breathing method to charge talismans and magical tools. Uh, so you are going to be using the magic of breathing all the way through initiation into Hermetics and beyond. You will. But for this exercise right now, you're going to say in with the virtue, out with the vice. So if I'm trying for kindness and getting rid of anger, I'm going to breathe in the kindness. And I'm going to imagine and believe that kindness is flowing into my lungs right along with that air. And when I breathe out, I'm going to know and have absolute faith that the vice is being breathed out with that exhale, right? So in with the virtue, out with the vice. That's how it works. Simple as that. And oh, but wait, what about poor breathing? Well, Bardon introduces the concept of pore breathing. And essentially, what you're doing, and this is common in Eastern meditational practices as well, um, you are breathing in the virtue, but in your imagination, you are now breathing that virtue in not only through your air pipe down into your lungs, and it's going out through the capillaries of your lungs into your bloodstream, but you're also drawing it in through the pores of your skin. Very interesting. And you all know the story of Buddy Ebsen. Um, Buddy Ebsen was going to be the Tin Man in the 1938 Wizard of Oz. And they had him all set up and they painted him with this silver paint and then they sprinkled him with aluminum dust. And he ended up in the hospital because that was really toxic, you know. So his body, his skin couldn't breathe. And then he inhaled some of this aluminum dust and he ended up having to be hospitalized. So they got a different actor and, they painted him silver, but this time they mixed the dust in with the paint. He got an eye infection. So, the reality here is your body is pretty amazing. And your skin is your largest organ. And so what we're talking about here is how your skin also breathes in that virtue and then expels that vice. So when I'm pore breathing, all it is just ratcheting up the basic breathing, right? Because instead of taking in the breath, you're going to now breathe in, but you're also going to imagine that virtue entering your body not only through your air pipe into your lungs, but also through the pores in your skin. And you can practice it. Just hold out your hand and start breathing vital energy, just the energy of life. And Bardon talks about that in step one. So read up on that. Vital energy is the physical part of the akasha. You know, it is. And so, you know, you can breathe in this vital energy into your hand. And pretty soon when you breathe in with the inhale, but you're inhaling it through the pores on your hand. Pretty soon you're going to be able to feel that coming in through the pores on your hand. That's how to pore breathe. It's it's as simple as that. It really is. So these are again three of the most powerful and transformative magical techniques that you can use. You're going to start using them now, but you're going to use them all the way through, just so you know. So we're done here. And in the next video, I'm going to cover the first part of step two, which is auto suggestion. That whole thing is fascinating. And remember, I talked at length in a prior video about how powerful you are and how careful you need to be about how you talk to you and about how potent we all are in terms of our feelings and our thoughts and the release of those energies into the universe. We're incredibly powerful beings. And, autosuggestion really works. And there is just massive literature that talks about that. And it's the art of programming your subconscious. That's what you're doing. And we're also going to be having a lot of real fun developing our sensory imagination. That's not just visualizing, it's hearing in the imagination, it's smelling in the imagination, it's tasting in the imagination, it is feeling, right? And so I'm going to talk about some of the ways that I was able to get through that step because that whole plastic imagination thing that Bardon talks about is there's kind of a trick to it. Anyway, I will see you later. Farewell and be blessed.